Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the BIMA Conference 2020. And this year, BIMA have risen to the challenge that 2020 has given, and we have made our conference international. So welcome to all the delegates from outside of the UK and all the delegates from within the UK. So to get started with our conference, I am one of your co-hosts and my name is Madiha Waheed and I'm an oncology pharmacist, and this year I have led BIMA's Healthy Ramadan and also Pharmacy Careers Inductions campaign. And with me is a fabulous co-host, Kiran Rahim.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us at our National Islamic Medical Association conference, and thank you, Madiha, for a warm welcome. I hope you guys are all set for a really fantastic day today. Inshallah, I'm just going to go through some reminders about the conference etiquette. So as you can see in the corner of your screens, please note that this conference is being recorded. So inshallah, if, you will all have seen by now that you should all be muted and should have your videos off. If you have questions, there are questions in the Q&A box along the bottom of the screen. So pop them in and one of our team members will pick them up. Lastly, a huge amount of effort and work has gone into this to put this together for the Muslim community and for the Muslim healthcare professionals. And this is a conference that we aim to run every year. So inshallah, without your feedback, we couldn't get where we are. So please use that link that you can see there, www.bit.ly/feedback NC20. Now, just a polite reminder that our social media tag is BNAT Conference, NatConf20. You can use that on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Go wild with it and do share your thoughts about how we are doing today. Just a polite reminder about the disclaimer that the views that are expressed in this conference are of those that the people that are speaking don't necessarily represent the views of the BIMA members. And any conflict of interest will be shared before each session, and we have a jam-packed schedule. We have worked really hard, as you can see there, to try and make this relevant to the Muslim healthcare professional today. It's a long day from 12:30 to 6 o'clock. We have factored in breaks for Salah, and we have also try to give you regular breaks. But if you feel you need to, grab yourself a cup of tea, whatever it is to make yourself comfortable. But most importantly, I really hope that you enjoy and you learn something from a fantastic lineup of speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kiran. So yes, we have breaks in between, so don't be worried about Salah. And throughout the conference, as Kiran mentioned, get onto Twitter with our hashtag and keep your eyes open for our QR code for the feedback forms after each session. But even though we're gathered together separately, we should still start with the name of Allah, and we want to start with the remembrance of Allah in the hope that the angels would descend their wings upon us and that Allah may remember us and mention us. So I would like to introduce Hassan Iqbal, who is a fellow pharmacist and member of the BIMA Careers Induction team, to come and give us some Quran recitation. Over to you, Hassan.
Assalamu alaikum, Madiha. Jazakallah khair for that. And just want to say a very big thank you to BIMA for putting this together and for allowing me to be here today. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا ذكروا الله فاستغفروا لذنوبهم ومن يغفر الذنوب إلا الله ولم يصروا على ما فعلوا وهم يعلمون أولئك جزاؤهم مغفرة من ربهم وجنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ونعم أجر العاملين قد خلت من قبلكم سنن فسيروا في الأرض فانظروا كيف كان عاقبة المكذبين هذا بيان للناس وهدى وموعظة للمتقين ولا تهنوا ولا تحزنوا وأنتم الأعلون إن كنتم مؤمنين صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair, Hassan. That was absolutely beautiful. And thank you for taking the time to come and join our conference. So, to get things started, we have our incumbent Vice President, Dr. Wajid Akhter, who will take us through a story and explain to us what is BIMA. So, over to you, Brother Wajid.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عليه تسليما جميعا كثيرا. Let me introduce you to Kilich Ali Pasha. Kilich Ali Pasha started life off as an Italian sailor. And early on in his life, he reverted to Islam. After becoming a Muslim, he left Italy and he moved to the Ottoman Empire. And while he was in the Ottoman Empire, he started rising through the ranks. He was a sailor again in the Ottoman Empire, but he started rising through the ranks of the military. He went from being a sailor to a captain of a ship, from a captain of a ship to a captain of a fleet, and eventually he became the Captain Pasha, the Admiral of the Ottoman Navy. This Italian revert had now become one of the most powerful people in the whole Ottoman Empire, and also one of the most powerful generals in the world. He took part in many battles, and in fact, he even took part and led a battle against his own home country, Italy, and defeated it for the Ottoman Empire. At the end of his career, when he had retired with all his medals and his honors and his glory and his wealth, he decided to do what many Ottoman leaders did at that time. He started to focus on his akhirah, on his afterlife. He had built a glittering career, but now it was time to build a glittering afterlife. And he wanted to build a mosque, a masjid in Istanbul to secure his sadaqah jariyah, to secure his legacy. So he went to the vizier, the grand vizier, who was like the prime minister, Rustam Pasha, and he asked him, can you give me a bit of land in Istanbul to build my mosque? Rustam Pasha hated him. Rustam Pasha was jealous of Kilich Ali Pasha. He was jealous of his wealth. He was jealous of his status. He was jealous about how much people loved him. So he said, no, I'm not going to give you any land. Kilich Ali Pasha was distraught. But if you don't give me any land, how will I build my mosque? Rustam Pasha dismissed him and said, you're the captain of the seas, Go, build your mosque on the sea. Get lost. Go build your mosque on the sea. What would you have done in that situation? When you were dismissed by the Prime Minister, when you were dismissed by the Grand Vizier, when you were told to go away and denied your opportunity to build your legacy, to build your future? Well, what most of us would have done is probably give up, come up with a different idea. But that's not what Qilitch Ali Pasha did, because that's why we're talking about him today. What did he do? He thought about it for a while, and then him and his sailors came up with a plan. They would start taking rocks and breaking them and filling the Bosphorus with these stones and pebbles. Eventually, they filled enough of the Bosphorus with stones and pebbles that they were able to create an artificial island. And on that artificial island, he built his mosque. And he built a fountain. And he built not just any mosque, but a grand mosque. And then he built a hammam. And then he built a madrasa. And then he built a soup kitchen. And then he built a library. And then he buried himself just as a final flourish on that island. You can still go to the Qilitch Ali Pasha Mosque complex today, the Kulliya, the complex that exists, the mosque that was built on the sea. So why did I tell you this story, brothers and sisters? You're not children and I'm not a babysitter. So why are we here? Why did I tell you the story? Because this story exemplifies something. It exemplifies resilience. The resilience. And when I talk about resilience, I'm not talking about, being Superman. Resilience is not being Superman. Some people think resilience is about being, manning up and just not letting anything get to you. That's not true. Resilience is not being like the mighty oak tree that fights against the wind, but will eventually break. Resilience is being like the willow tree that will bend all the way backwards and almost break, but will never actually break and will spring back eventually. Resilience is about going through a dark tunnel and not being able to see the light, but continuing because you have faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the light will eventually come. Resilience is about not being a stone, it's about being a diamond, which the more pressure that you put it under, the more beautiful the diamond is. The more times you cut the diamond, it doesn't bleed, but it becomes more brilliant. That's what resilience is. And that's what happened this year with BIMA. Brothers and sisters, in February of this year, we existed. We were doing well, alhamdulillah. But if you had told anyone that before the end of the year, if you had told anyone in February in BIMA that before the end of the year, we would have hit a pandemic that would have taken down economies all around the world, that would have destroyed industries like the airline industry, like the restaurant industry, that would have killed over 1 million people, that will have challenged humanity to a degree that it hasn't been challenged to for many, many decades. And yet, at this time, during this pandemic, despite almost everyone in BIMA being on the front line at varying degrees, despite us having our own worries about our own families, despite us being concerned and having PPE, which was like tissue paper at the beginning of the year, despite all of that, if you told me that before the end of the year, BIMA will have increased its membership to more than 4,000 members across the country, with more than 1,000 actively engaged volunteers, with every single one of our projects, not just continuing, but every one of them has done a special extra COVID project on top. If you had told me at the beginning of the year that we would have done it, we would have completed a Ramadan rapid review, which is probably one of the most in-depth and accessible looks into fasting and advice for patients in Ramadan that has been published ever. If you would have told me by the end of the year that in Lifesavers, we would have gone from 9 countries to 12 countries. If you would have told me at the beginning of the year that our health promotion team would have not only done cancer awareness work, not only done organ donation work, not only done work on vaccination, that we would have set up something called Operation Vaccination, which is a first of its kind in this country, bringing together Muslim organizations and scholars and scientists and medics to help advocate for vaccinations. If you would have told me at the beginning of the year that we've done webinars on all these topics, that our induction team would have more attendees than we've had in the last 5 years combined, that we would have reached out, whether our regional events team or our ethics team or our advocacy team or BIMA team, if you had told me that every single one of these projects would have continued, if you would have told me that we would have been responding to COVID at a level that has been not only praised by the Muslim community, but has been used by SAGE as an example of gold standard communication for ethnic minorities, that has been an example for other countries, that we are helping them with their COVID response work. If you would have told me that we would have done work for the healthcare community as well as outside the community, if you would have told me that we would have done the unthinkable, coordinated with the scholars, with the Muslim leaders, and closed the masajid down before the government ordered us to do it, that we were ahead of the curve. If you would have told me that we would have advocated a lockdown before the government advocated it, we were ahead of the curve. If you would have told me that we would have reopened the mosques with a 9-state program that everyone agrees is one of the best in the that has been put out there, the most thorough, and is still acceptable and useful today because it was future-proofed at that time. If you would have told me that beyond all of that, that we would have taken a leading role right at the start of the pandemic to coordinate between the whole Muslim community, between the umbrella bodies, between the economics angle, the burials angle, the mental health angle, the charities, publicity groups, scholars. If you would have told us that we would have helped the Muslim community unite, and this is not us taking credit for everything, but we would have been part of it more than it has ever been united before, then we would have said you were crazy. You said you're crazy. How would this happen in February? How is it possible? But that's what happened. That's what resilience is, my brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters, remember this. This year has taught us many, many lessons, but the one thing that I want to get across to you in this welcoming point is that I used to ask myself, why BIMA? Why now? Why us? Why here? BIMA could have been set up any number of decades ago by any number of people at any other time. And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us why this year. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was always going to send this pandemic. But He also made sure that 6 years ago, one of the organizations that would help make sure that the impact of this pandemic would be lessened on the Muslim community if we united, was founded at that time and was growing, so that at just the right moment, we were at just the right time and at just the right level of maturity to be able to do something about it. Remember this, we've always defined ourselves by our faith and our ability to overcome the impossible. And we count these moments when we dare to aim higher, to break barriers, to reach for the stars, to make the unknown known. We used to count these moments as our proudest achievements. But we lost all that. Or perhaps we haven't lost it. Perhaps we've just forgotten that we are still pioneers and that we've barely begun our journey and that our greatest accomplishments cannot be behind us. Inshallah, our destiny lies ahead of us. So my brothers and sisters, do what you can and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will do what you can't. Join Team BIMA and let us continue on this beginning of this journey of uniting, inspiring, and serving, so that inshallah, before the end of our lives, we can all build our own mosque on the sea. Wa jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Wajid. very poignant and extremely succinct. And I think that this year, if any, has truly shown us what unite, inspire and serve means. And the way that we've served, how you've said through Operation Vaccination, through the COVID response group, with the collaborations with Muslim Council of Britain, the absolutely groundbreaking Ramadan Rapid Review, the fact that so many healthcare professionals came together in just 6 short weeks to put that together, and that it's gone out to peer-reviewed journals. It's completely redefined what serve means, and that we can take our skills and not only do it within the mosques, but actually use it to actually change policy everywhere. And so, you know, to see how the Ummah has actually dealt with the pandemic this year, I guess it brings us to the question as to how we handled the pandemic in the past. What lessons can we learn from history? So back to Dr. Wajid Akhter to give us his lowdown.
Jazakallah khairan, everyone. Apologies that you have me twice. You must have must have done some sin in your life that you're getting punished like this. But I promise it'll be a very short punishment. So what can we learn from our Islamic history? What are you expecting from this talk? You're expecting me to talk about plagues and the way that the Muslim community dealt with it. You're expecting me to talk about how the Sahaba came out of the peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula, came out of the Hijaz, and how this group of Bedouins and people who were ignored by history, literally every conqueror before this had gone left and right across the world, the Persians and the Romans and the Greeks and the Macedonians, everyone had gone left and right and completely ignored these people, because what's the point of conquering these people in this desert? How these people came out of the desert and simultaneously conquered 2 superpowers at the same time. It wasn't like they went and fought the Persians and then decided to fight the Romans. They fought them at the same time, most of the time with half the same people, and simultaneously brought them both to heel. And how this greatest generation, who could not be defeated in battle, were eventually decimated by the plague of Amwas, which was a 3rd, 4th, 5th wave of the plague of Justinian. More than 20,000 Sahaba, especially in the command and control of the upper echelons of the Sahaba, were killed by the plague. Maybe you want me to go through how the Muslim communities dealt with the plague in future times, how there was confusion, and in Cairo, for example, when the plague hit Cairo, and people were dying in great numbers, they organized a prayer where they brought everyone together in the mosques to pray for deliverance. And unfortunately, that caused the plague to grow even more rapidly. Maybe you want me to talk about how entire cities have been wiped out by the plague, cities that were metropolises at that time and now don't exist on the map. How hard the plague hit the Muslim community. How the Muslim community rationalized the plague as a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and martyrdom. How the plague affected the course of Islamic history. You know, someone like Muawiyah anhu became the ruler of Syria and then became the Khalif, partly because there was a huge gap in the number of Sahaba between him and seniority, but a lot of them died in the plague. So his rise to power was partially due to the plague, and the destruction of other empires was partially due to the plague. But listen, that stuff you can read up on Wikipedia. You don't need me to tell you about that. Let me tell you a story that you won't read on Wikipedia. This is a picture from Samarkand, and if you haven't been, I recommend going. It's beautiful, and it's almost like Islamic history preserved there. And this is from the golden age, or one of the golden ages of Islamic civilization history. This was a period in which Muslim culture was dominant across the world. This is a time in which we built beautiful buildings. This was a time in which a man would stand on the roof of his house in Khiva, which is near Samarkand, look at the sky and accurately predict the circumference of the earth And today, when we use satellite imagery, he's off by less than 100 miles. I don't know how he did that. This is a time when people were competing with each other in philanthropy, in building mosques, in madrasas, in hospitals. This was a time in which you had free health care at the point of use in places like the Bimaristan and Nuri. This was a time in which not one, but two popes, you should know this, two popes studied in a madrasa. Because that's where you went to. They studied fiqh, they studied Qur'an, they studied Arabic. Why? Because that's where you go to learn education, world-class education. This was a time in which our culture, our civilization, our way of life was at its pinnacle. And at this time, when we were, expansive and growing and undefeated champions in the world, the only limit to our growth was where we decided to stop. At this time, near Samarkand, there is a state called Khwarizm, and a group of businessmen came from the neighboring state of Mongolia to do business. About 200 came to do business in Khwarizm, because this is where you go to where there's the money. You go there where there's money and people have talent and so on. So you go to do business. So about 200 businessmen came to Khwarizm to do business. And when they were there, some say they were robbed, others say they were killed, but something bad happened to them, and they were, at the very least, they were robbed of their goods. Maybe they were even, some of them were killed. So news reached back to their leader, their tribal leader, that that this has happened to them. So he wrote, his name was Temujin. He wrote to the governor of Khwarizm, the Muslim governor of Khwarizm, and said, my people, my businessmen have been mistreated in your land. So I request you to give them justice. Find the perpetrators and give them justice. Do you know what the governor of Khwarizm did? The governor of Khwarizm killed the messenger. He was so upset. How dare this tribal chieftain, how dare this nobody tell me, the Muslim governor of Khwarizm, how to run my business? How dare he tell us what to do? So he killed the messenger. He would not listen. Unfortunately for this governor, this act of injustice gives you a taste of what was going on in the Muslim world. With all this beauty, unfortunately, injustice had grown in the leadership, but also in the common level as well. And that's a generalization, but you could get an idea of the kind of people that we made our leaders and the kind of people that they came from. These leaders, our leaders are not devils sent from hell to rule over us. They're from amongst us. If you're ruled by a tyrant, then most of the time there's something wrong with the people as well. The people need to change as well. So, not always, but that's the case. So what happened was he killed the messenger. Now, unfortunately for this governor, when the news reached back to that chieftain, the chieftain got up and he said, I'm going to teach him and everyone who's unjust a lesson. And unfortunately for all of us, Temujin's other name was Genghis Khan. And when Genghis Khan left Mongolia and started conquering and killed the people, he killed the governor of Khwarizm and he killed the people of Khwarizm, him and his family didn't leave until they laid waste to most of the known world. Baghdad, Sultania, the Middle East, everything fell in their path. Brothers and sisters, this is not a typical medical presentation, right? That's not what you hear in a medical conference. So why am I saying this? Because no matter how much destruction was brought by the Mongols, the real destruction came with them on small rats with a small bug called Yersinia pestis. When the Mongols came out, they brought with them the Black Death, the worst pandemic known to humanity, killing more than 200 to 250 million people at that time. That started here. And it started with injustice. As medics, We know that when we're looking for, when we're at a pandemic, we're looking for vaccines, we're looking for cures. But as Muslims, we need to learn the lesson that the worst pandemics, that pandemic known to mankind started when? With what? It didn't start with the bug. It started with injustice. It started with unchecked injustice. And we have to ask ourselves today, as Muslims as well, there's a lot of injustice in this world. Did we think that the cries of the widows in Syria would not have an impact? That the du'as of the starving children in Yemen would not reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That the tears of the refugees from Myanmar would not reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Did we think that the cries of the oppressed would not one day reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then reach us? It has reached us. So solving a pandemic as a doctor, as a medic, as a healthcare professional is about medication, vaccination, social distancing. But as a Muslim, it's about bringing justice back to the world. And this is something that we need to remember ourselves. Allah's Prophet ﷺ, I finish with this. He made 3 du'as. This is the most beloved of all creation. He made 3 du'as. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these are words to this effect, let my people not be destroyed by an external enemy. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted that dua. Let my people, let my ummah not be destroyed by plague. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted that dua. Let my people not be destroyed by disunity. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refused that dua. This is a lesson to us. The real cure to everything, to pandemics, to cancer, to any disease, to oppression and disease and disharmony in the world, begins first with uniting along the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, uniting together as Muslims, inshallah, on this faith that we believe in. And inshallah, we have today, we're united in grief for those who have passed away. We're united in fear from this virus and its effect. But inshallah, tomorrow, let us be united in happiness, in power, and in working together, inshallah. Subhanallah, hamdaka nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk, wa jazakallahu khairan.